Clinton, Simpson Bowles, put forth the right framework, namely, we have to restrain spending, we have to have adequate revenues, and we have to incentivize growth. It's a three-part formula, and they reached an agreement. But what is very hard to do is to then take that agreement if you don't believe that you're going to be able to move the other side. Secretary Clinton, well, this may be born more out of hope than experience in the last few years, but Simpson Bowles, and I know you heard from Erskine earlier today, put forth the right framework, namely, we have to restrain spending, we have to have adequate revenues, and we have to incentivize growth. It's a three-part formula. The specifics can be negotiated depending upon whether we're acting in good faith or not. And what Senator Simpson and Erskine did was to bring Republicans and Democrats alike to the table. And you had the full range of ideological views from I think Tom Coburn to Dick Durbin. And they reached an agreement. But what is very hard to do is to then take that agreement if you don't believe that you're going to be able to move the other side. And where we are now is in this gridlock dysfunction. So you've got Democrats saying that, you have to have more revenues. That's the sine qua non of any kind of agreement. You have Republicans saying no on revenues. You have to cut much more deeply into spending. Well, looks what's happened. We are slowly returning to growth. It's not as much or as fast as many of us would like to see, but, we're certainly better off than our European friends, and we're beginning to, I believe, kind of come out of the long aftermath of the 08 crisis. Clinton speech for Morgan Stanley, April 18, 2013. Clinton, the Simpson-Bowles framework and the big elements of it were right. You have to restrain spending, you have to have adequate revenues, and you have to have growth. Clinton, so, the Simpson-Bowles framework and the big elements of it were right. The specifics can be negotiated and argued over, but you got to do all three. You have to restrain spending, you have to have adequate revenues, and you have to have growth. And I think we are smart enough to figure out how to do that. Clinton speech for Morgan Stanley, April 18, 2013. Clinton is aware of security concerns around BlackBerry's. Clinton, at the State Department we were attacked every hour, more than once an hour, by incoming efforts to penetrate everything we had, and that was true across the U.S. government. Clinton, but, at the State Department we were attacked every hour, more than once an hour, by incoming efforts to penetrate everything we had, and that was true across the U.S. government. And we knew it was going on when I would go to China, or I would go to Russia. We would leave all of our electronic equipment on the plane, with the batteries out, because this is a new frontier, and they're trying to find out not just about what we do in our government, they're trying to find out about what a lot of companies do, and they were going after the personal emails of people who worked in the State Department. So it's not like the only government in the world that is doing anything is the United States, but the United States, compared to a number of our competitors, is the only government in the world with any kind of safeguards, any kind of checks and balances. They may in many respects need to be strengthened, and people need to be reassured, and they need to have their protections embodied in law. But I think turning over a lot of that material intentionally or unintentionally, because of the way it can be drained, gave all kinds of information not only to big countries, but to networks and terrorist groups, and the like. So I have a hard time thinking that somebody who is a champion of privacy and liberty has taken refuge in Russia under Putin's authority, and then he calls into a Putin talk show and says, "President Putin, do you spy on people?" And President Putin says, "Well, from one intelligence professional to another, of course not." Oh, thank you so much. I mean, really, I don't know. I have a hard time following it. Clinton speech at UConn, April 23, 2014. Hillary Clinton, when I got to the State Department, it was still against the rules to let most, or let all Foreign Service officers have access to a BlackBerry. I mean, let's face it, our government is woefully behind in all of its policies that affect the use of technology. When I got to the State Department, it was still against the rules to let most, or let all Foreign Service officers have access to a BlackBerry. You couldn't have desktop computers when Colin Powell was there. Everything that you are taking advantage of, inventing and using, is still a generation or two behind when it comes to our government. Hillary Clinton remarks at Nexenta, August 28, 2014. Hillary Clinton, we couldn't take our computers, we couldn't take our personal devices off the plane in China and Russia. I mean, probably the most frustrating part of this whole debate, our country's acting like we're the only people in the world trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, every time I went to countries like China or Russia, I mean, we couldn't take our computers, We couldn't take our personal devices. We couldn't take anything off the plane because they're so good. They would penetrate them in a minute, less, a nanosecond. So we would take the batteries out. We'd leave them on the plane. Hillary Clinton remarks at Nexenta, August 28, 2014. Clinton said when she got to state, employees were not mostly permitted to have handheld devices. You know, when Colin Powell showed up as Secretary of State in 2001, most State Department employees still didn't even have computers on their desks. When I got there, they were not mostly permitted to have handheld devices. I mean, so you're thinking, how do we operate in this new environment dominated by technology, globalizing forces? We have to change. And I can't expect people to change if I don't try to model it and let it. Clinton speech for General Electric's Global Leadership Meeting, Boca Raton, FL, January 6, 2014. Hillary Clinton said, you know, you can't bring your phone and computer when traveling to China and Russia, and she had to take her batteries out and put them in a special box. And anybody who has ever traveled in other countries, some of which shall remain nameless, except for Russia and China, you know that you can't bring your phones and your computers. And if you do, good luck. I mean, we would not only take the batteries out, we would leave the batteries and the devices on the plane in special boxes. Now, we didn't do that because we thought it would be fun to tell somebody about. We did it because we knew that we were all targets and that we would be totally vulnerable. So it's not only what others do to us and what we do to them and how many people are involved in it. It's what's the purpose of it, what is being collected, and how can it be used. And there are clearly people in this room who know a lot about this. And some of you could be very useful contributors to the conversation because you're sophisticated enough to know that it's not just, do it, don't do it. We have to have a way of doing it, and then we have to have a way of analyzing it, and then we have to have a way of sharing it. Goldman Sachs Builders and Innovators Summit, October 29, 2013. Hillary Clinton lamented how far behind the State Department was in technology, saying people were not even allowed to use mobile devices because of security issues. Personally, having, you know, lived and worked in the White House, having been a senator, having been Secretary of State, there has traditionally been a great pool of very talented, hard-working people. And just as I was saying about the credit market, our personnel policies haven't kept up with the changes necessary in government. We have a lot of difficulties in getting. When I got to the State Department, we were so far behind in technology. It was embarrassing. And, you know, people were not even allowed to use mobile devices because of security issues and cost issues. And we really had to try to push into the last part of the 20th century in order to get people functioning in 2009 and 10. Goldman Sachs Builders and Innovators Summit, October 29, 2013. Clinton remarks are pro-Keystone and pro-trade. Clinton. So I think that Keystone is a contentious issue. And of course it is important on both sides of the border for different and sometimes opposing reasons. So I think that Keystone is a contentious issue. And of course it is important on both sides of the border for different and sometimes opposing reasons. But that is not our relationship. And I think our relationship will get deeper and stronger and put us in a position to really be global leaders in energy and climate change if we worked more closely together. And that's what I would like to see us do. Remarks at Time Public, June 18, 2014. Hillary Clinton said her dream is a hemispheric common market. With open trade and open markets, my dream is a hemispheric common market. With open trade and open borders, sometime in the future with energy that is as green and sustainable as we can get it, powering growth and opportunity for every person in the hemisphere. 05162013 Remarks to Banco Itaú Doc, page 28. Hillary Clinton said we have to have a concerted plan to increase trade. We have to resist protectionism and other kinds of barriers to trade. Secondly, I think we have to have a concerted plan to increase trade already under the current circumstances. You know, that Inter-American Development Bank figure is pretty surprising. There is so much more we can do. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit, but businesses on both sides have to make it a priority, and it's not for governments to do, but governments can either make it easy or make it hard, and we have to resist protectionism, other kinds of barriers to market access and to trade, and I would like to see this get much more attention and be not just a policy for a year under President X or President Y, but a consistent one. 05162013 Remarks to Banco Itaú Doc, page 32. Clinton is more favorable to Canadian health care and single-payer. Clinton said single-payer health care systems can get costs down, and is as good or better on primary care, but they do impose things like waiting times. If you look at countries that are comparable, like Switzerland or Germany, For example, they have mixed systems. They don't have just a single-payer system, but they have very clear controls over budgeting and accountability. If you look at the single-payer systems, like Scandinavia, Canada, and elsewhere, they can get costs down because, although their care, according to statistics, overall is as good or better on primary care, in particular, they do impose things like waiting times. It takes longer to get like a hip replacement than it might take here. Hillary Clinton remarks to ECGR Grand Rapids, June 17, 2013. Clinton cited President Johnson's success in establishing Medicare and Medicaid and said she wanted to see the U.S. have universal health care like in Canada. On healthcare we are the prisoner of our past. The way we got to develop any kind of medical insurance program was during World War II when companies facing shortages of workers began to offer healthcare benefits as an inducement for employment. So from the early 1940s healthcare was seen as a privilege connected to employment. And after the war when soldiers came back and went back into the market there was a lot of competition, because the economy was so heated up. So that model continued. And then of course our large labor unions bargained for healthcare with the employers that their members worked for. So from the early 1940s until the early 1960s we did not have any Medicare, or our program for the poor called Medicaid until President Johnson was able to get both passed in 1965. So the employer model continued as the primary means by which working people got health insurance. People over 65 were eligible for Medicare, Medicaid, which was a partnership, a funding partnership between the federal government and state governments, provided some, but by no means all poor people with access to health care. So what we've been struggling with certainly Harry Truman, then Johnson was successful on Medicare and Medicaid, but didn't touch the employer-based system. Then actually Richard Nixon made a proposal that didn't go anywhere, but was quite far-reaching. Then with my husband's administration we worked very hard to come up with a system, but we were very much constricted by the political realities that if you had your insurance from your employer you were reluctant to try anything else. And so we were trying to build a universal system around the employer-based system. And indeed now with President Obama's legislative success in getting the Affordable Care Act passed, that is what we've done. We still have primarily an employer-based system, but we now have people able to get subsidized insurance. So we have health insurance companies playing a major role in the provision of health care, both to the employed whose employers provide health insurance, and to those who are working but on their own are not able to afford it and their employers either don't provide it, or don't provide it at an affordable price. We are still struggling. We've made a lot of progress. 10 million Americans now have insurance who didn't have it before the Affordable Care Act, and that is a great step forward. Applause. And what we're going to have to continue to do is monitor what the costs are and watch closely to see whether employers drop more people from insurance so that they go into what we call the health exchange system. So we're really just at the beginning, but we do have Medicare for people over 65, and you couldn't, I don't think, take it away if you tried, because people are very satisfied with it. But we also have a lot of political and financial resistance to expanding that system to more people. So we're in a learning period as we move forward with the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, and I'm hoping that whatever the shortfalls or the glitches have been, which in a big piece of legislation you're going to have, those will be remedied and we can really take a hard look at what's succeeding, fix what isn't, and keep moving forward to get to affordable universal health care coverage like you have here in Canada. Clinton speech for Tyne Public, Saskatoon, CA, January 21, 2015.